Hey VC, this is Dave in Texas here, and I'm back for my third video. And I mentioned this book last time that I found down at the library here in town, and have been looking at it, and it's a book on Hyperion Press by Alan Redder and John Baxter, and it's called Listen to This. And you might be wondering, what's this book about? Well, it's very similar. During library sale, I'll pick up books and kind of thumb through them and read what they're about, like most people do. And it's very similar to the way the VC community is, with the exception being that there are famous musicians in here, and what they do is recommend albums that they like, much like we do here in the VC. And it was published in 1999, and supposedly from the introduction it says that it's a guide to recorded music based on recommendations by musicians rather than critics. A large cross-section of musics of the world's leading popular musicians was approached to participate in to Listen to This. All quoted material in this book is from original interviews conducted for this project, unless otherwise indicated. And I'll pick out like one or two and kind of give you a little bit of a indication of what they recommend. But one of the reasons that this is kind of interesting is that it says that the musicians, rather than say the average listener will kind of listen to music as a whole, and whereas say the musicians may pick up on certain passages or certain instruments and can bring that out as to what they hear in that music. And as an example, they say many jazz critics and purist fans rejected the albums that guitarist Wes Montgomery made in the late 1960s because of their syrupy production values and orchestrations. But you'll see how Pat Metheny, another guitarist, cuts right through the sugarcoating to acknowledge the quality of Montgomery's playing, which was superb on those albums. So there you go. And there's all kind of musicians in these albums. I mean, it's not any one specific genre. It's not jazz or rock or whatever. They pretty much cover a large section. And like a lot of books similar to this, I don't know if you can see any of these. I don't think you can. But you know, there's some that, you know, I wish they'd chosen this guy, not that guy, and you know, I'm not interested in that guy. But that's just kind of the, I mean, where one person I may not be interested in, probably somebody else will, and that's just kind of the nature of these type books. I mean, they cater to a broad section of taste. But some of the musicians in here are Dave Alvin from the Blasters, Greg Allman, Paul Barr from Little Feat, Adrian Belew from King Crimson, Peter Buck from REM, Ruth Brown, I believe she's a jazz pianist, Roseanne Cash, Chuck D from Public Enemy, let's see here, Don Everly from the Everly Brothers, Gilberto Gil, Brazilian musician, Buddy Guy, Herbie Hancock, Levon Helm, Andrew Hill was a jazz pianist. John Lee Hooker, Mark Isham, Charlie Hunter, Taj Mahal, Bobby McFerrin, Phil Lesh, Sir George Martin, Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth. Let's see here. Jeff Tweedy from Wilco, Pete Seeger, John Schofield, another jazz guitarist, Doug Somm from Texas Band, Sonny Rollins, Joshua Redman, Wilson Pickett, and so on and so forth. Pat Metheny, Cobe Mebb, I guess that's how you say his name, Moby. So I mean, it's just a big cross section of different musicians, and I've been enjoying reading some of their recommendations. Like for instance, here's one on Robert Wyatt. He was a musician that was in, of course, the early Soft Machine group, and later he had an accident where he was crippled, and was also in a band known as Matching Mole. So I think I got one of theirs here. Well, I got one of their albums. I don't know if I brought it with me. Anyway, it talks about some of his releases, and also like this, they'll ask them what albums they like, and also what albums they have done that are their favorite albums that they have done themselves. At least some of them. They may not do all of them, but let's see. It says right after Robert Wyatt's 1997 album Sleep received glorious reviews in all the right places. Rolling Stone, Spin magazine, musicians, and others found that album memorable. So anyway, let's see. These are some of Robert's favorite artists and recordings. He lists Ray Charles with Betty Carter, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, Charlie Mingus, and Max Roach. It was an album that they were all on called Jazz at Massey Hall. And it also will tell you, like, if you're looking for these particular albums, what label they're on and everything. This is on the Original Jazz Classics label. Gil Evans, Out of the Cool, on Impulse. Miles Davis with Gil Evans. Miles Davis, The Complete Birth of the Cool, on Capitol Records. And also, they'll have right here, I mean, they'll talk a little bit about the albums too that they've recommended. So it's just not like a listing. Like the Modern Jazz Quartet, Concord. I've got that album actually. The Modern Jazz Quartet with Jimmy Giuffre, I think that's how you say his name. Van Morrison's Astral Weeks, Nina Simone, I Put a Spell on You. Sly and the Family Stone, Stand. Randy Crawford's Secret Combination or Secret Combinations on Warner Brothers. I'm not familiar with that. John Coltrane, Africa. Charlie Mingus, Mingus Presents Mingus. Ornette Coleman, This Is Our Music. Ed Blackwell on drums. And Art Blakely, the Art Blakely Jazz Messengers with Thelonious Monk on Atlantic. And as far as his own solo work or his own work, let's see here what he says. He says Robert calls attention to a couple of albums by other artists that he contributed to. Well, he named some other musicians, but I was looking for his own. Let's see here. Well, he liked the one that he had just released was one called Sleep. He said he liked that one a lot. but also The End of an Ear, Rock Bottom, and Ruth is Stranger Than Richard. So there's a couple of them. But as far as musicians that he's also played with, he said the Michael Mantler, Hapless Child on ECM, John Greaves songs, and then he talks a little bit about those particular albums. So anyway, and then it goes on and tells a little bit about, you know, a little bit about some of the Soft Machine albums he was on and what have you. But anyway, if that sort of thing interests you, you can probably find this on Amazon pretty cheap, used or whatever. It came out in 1999, so I imagine you could probably find this for a couple of bucks on Amazon. Went down to the library here today, yesterday, or this past week, and found some used CDs, and then I went down and found some records down here at a new record store that has just opened not too long ago. There are actually two used record stores here in our town. One of them is Sunshine Records, and the newer one is El Guapo Records. And then we also got a new little store from Half Price Books, which I'm real happy about. A great little addition to the town. I like going in there and just kind of looking around. It's way on the south part of town, but you know, I'll certainly go by there quite a bit. As far as the vinyl, and I'm going to do a needle drop on one of these if we still have enough time. I don't want it to run too long. But this is one of the records that I picked up. It's classical. Saint-Saëns, I guess is how you say that. It's organ, Symphony number 3. Now this is the one I might do a needle drop on if we got enough time. It's a Lab 75, North Texas State University lab band with Leon Breeden as the director. Here's the back of it. You might be thinking, some of you probably already know about maybe this, but a lot of North Texas State University, which is up in Denton, which is north of Dallas, is a good school for teachers and musicians alike. And one of the more famous musicians of late that came out of there, and I don't know them all, was Lyles Mays, who is the keyboardist for Pat Metheny Group, and he has gone on to make his own albums as well. Well, I was looking around at these. They had several of these Lab 75s, and I was like, wow, I wonder if they got one with Lyles Mays on it. Well, sure enough, this one does. I couldn't believe it. Now, if you look right over here, that's him right there. Okay. And right here is him playing his keyboard. Now, this is Lab 75, so this is actually from the year 1975. I bet that's about the year that he graduated from North Texas. So this is very early. This is a very early album with Lyles Mays on it. And if you've ever listened to jazz band concerts, it's very typical of that. But it's also pretty progressive in parts, and it's really a pretty neat little find for the money I paid for it. And I'll play a little bit of Lyles does some piano solos on here, but I mean there are other like a flute solo and so forth. On the second side they do What Was by Chick Corea. It's an 8-minute song. And then the rest of side 2 is the continuing adventures of Supertonic. And it has some Lyles Mays solos on all through the album, really. So anyway, I'll try and do a needle drop of that here pretty quick before time runs out. Found this one too. This is Bob James on CBS Records. James is, I just listened to a little bit of this today, and I believe he's a keyboardist. But it's got Eric Gale on it, electric guitar. Hiram Bullock. He used to play with on Dave Letterman's show, I believe, back in the early days. Electric guitar. It's got Steve Kahn, who's an acoustical guitarist, and several other musicians. Steve Gadd on drums, and Michael Brecker does a solo, and it was in real good shape. I was happy to find it, and it's kind of I don't know, I guess you might say like light jazz or progressive jazz. I found this one here, which is the second volume of this Golden Voyage. I was looking for it, so I was real happy to pick that up. And found some CDs down at the library. I found Spyro Gyra's 3 Wishes, which again is like progressive jazz. And I found this one called Dreams Beyond Control. Okay. Haven't listened to any of the Spyro Gyra yet, but I do like their music. I've got a greatest hits in there by him and some other ones. Here's one called The New Crystal Silence with Chick Corea and Gary Burton. I've got their first one on ECM, the first Crystal Silence, and it's real good. So, and this is a 2-record set, so I'm really interested in hearing this. It should be pretty great. Here's one by John Scofield. It is called John Scofield Quartet, What We Do. And it's got Joe Lovano on saxophone, and Dennis Irwin bass, and Bill Stewart on drums. I'm not sure what year this came out. Let's see if I can see. I don't see that it's on Blue Note. 1993. So it's a relatively new John Scofield album, but I do like the way John plays, and so it should be interesting. I've got several of his albums as well. Found this one from Marvin Gaye. It's like a greatest hits by him. I found this 2 CD set from Pink Floyd. It's called Echoes. And to tell you the truth, I mean, I still like Pink Floyd, don't get me wrong. They've made some pretty classic rock, and I certainly don't need to tell you how great they are or whatever. I mean, they've all earned millions of dollars. But I kind of am tired of, like, their later stuff, I'm kind of tired of hearing. I kind of tend to like their earlier stuff, and one of the first albums I bought from them was Uma Guma, and that's still that kind of exploratory stuff, which I know they said they didn't particularly care for that album themselves, but that album is one of the ones that I like listening to quite a bit. I found this by Joe Farrell Quartet, who is a keyboardist, and it's on the CTI label, and I also had the album of it as well. It's got here you go, Chick Corea and piano, Jack DeJohnette on drums, Dave Holland on bass, and John McLaughlin on guitar. So and then Joe Farrell plays soprano and tenor sax, flute, and oboe. And since I already had the album, I know it was a really good album. So it should be a really good one to have on CD as well. I got this Brazilian jazz by Babel Gilberto. It's kind of bossa nova. I'm not familiar with her, but I'm just about up to hear any kind of new Brazilian music like that, samba or whatever. So anyway, I'll let you hear a little bit of that North Texas jazz album. I'm going to have to get up from where I am right now and go back behind me over here to where my stereo's at, this one here. And I'll just kind of end with it, so you can just kind of get an inkling of what it is. Hopefully it's all right. We'll see. I was really kind of surprised how progressive this album was in certain sections. Now this is the beginning of a Chick Corea piece, and it has a piano solo in it by Lawrence Mays. But like I said, the branch of UT here in town has a jazz band, and generally around Christmas time I like going down there and hearing the jazz band play. And there's a junior college here too, and I like listening to that as well. Let me go back over by the stereo and I'll kind of move it around a little bit. Lawrence Mays right here playing. Anyway, VC, I just wanted to share a few little needle drops with you on this North Texas album. I was real happy to find it, Lab 75, and the stuff I found here recently to get me through the holidays. Hope everyone in the vinyl community is ready for Christmas and going to have a good holiday and a good New Year, healthy New Year. So happy listening, and take care.